Please turn to page 20 of your Suzuki Book 1. Observe on page 20 that there are 3 photos. These 3 pictures depict 3 different finger patterns. At the moment, we're only going to focus on finger pattern number 1, that is the top one, because the first half of Suzuki Book 1 pretty much exclusively uses that finger pattern. Also notice that the fingers are on the A string in these photos. So what I'd like to do is we'll replicate those notes on the A string ourselves, and we're going to talk about what the names of those notes are. But before we do that, what I'd like to do is just kind of acquaint you with what the fingers are doing and what they represent. So first, I just want to go over a quick basic terminology. You might already know this, but just to review it, we'll talk about it. Your first finger in violin talk is your index finger. This is your first finger. Your second finger is your middle finger. Your third finger is your ring finger. Your fourth finger is your pinky. So we have 4 fingers and a thumb. That's pretty much the way we look at our hands when we play the violin. Now, if we were playing the A string without any fingers, we would just be playing the note A. In other words, if no fingers were down on the fingerboard and you plucked the A string, you'd have A. If you were to put down your first finger, you would have B. Why? Because the note after A in the alphabet is B. If you put down your second finger, you would have C sharp. Why? Because the note after B is C sharp. And we're going to talk about what the sharp means in a minute. I'll get back to that. After the note C sharp, putting down the third finger, you would have the note D, because D is after C in the alphabet. And then what comes after D? E. Now, let's take it backwards a step, because I just want to take 1 step forwards and 2 steps backwards now in order to kind of go full circle. And then we're going to keep doing this and going in spirals. And that by the end of this lesson, if you're following me, you're going to realize you've learned a lot more in a more detailed way than if I were to throw everything at you at once. So here's what I'm trying to say. When you have the finger pattern that's at the top of the page, that finger pattern has a special name called the whole half whole pattern. Now let's talk about why. If you look at the picture, you'll notice that this finger and this finger, that is the first and second finger, have a space between them. The second and third finger are scrunched up really close together, and the third and fourth finger have a space between them. When 2 fingers have a space between them, that is called a whole step. When 2 fingers touch each other, that is called a half step. And when 2 fingers have a space between them, what was that called? We just talked about it. That's a whole step. So we have whole step, half step, whole step. That's why it's called the whole half whole finger pattern. In contrast, you'll notice that the second finger pattern has the first and second fingers touching, and then second and third not touching, and third and fourth not touching. That is called half whole whole. And that's going to be more important to you in the second half of Suzuki's Book 1. But we're not going to talk about that right now. Now, let's go back around the spiral again, or the circle, however you want to call the analogy. And we talked about the fact that we were on the A string, and I told you the names of the fingers on the A string. Remember, A, B, C sharp, D, E. Now, why is that C sharp? Have a look again at the sheet of paper with the key signatures on it that we talked about in the past. Do you remember we talked about how there was this thing called the circle of fifths, and as you're going in the order of key signatures, there are a certain number of sharps on the key signature that tell us what key we're playing in. If you've forgotten this, please just review that lesson very quickly. But in the meantime, what I'd like to tell you about is that the whole half whole finger pattern is the very beginning of the A major scale. The A major scale has not a regular C in it, but a C sharp. And I guess the best way I can describe that to you in a short amount of time is that a C sharp is just a little bit higher than a regular C. And the best way to visualize that is if you see a piano keyboard, I'm sure some of you realize or recognize that on a piano keyboard there are white keys and black keys. Well, the white keys have all of the names of the alphabet, going from A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and repeating again from A, B, C, D, E, F, G, etc., etc. But in between the white keys, there are sharps. So if we played the black key that's in between the keys C and D, we would actually be playing a C sharp. And that C sharp is just a little bit higher in sound than the regular C. And this has implications for what kinds of sounds we make on the violin. And I don't have the ability, or the time I should say, to go into this in more detail, because that would require a lesson on music theory, and it's beyond the scope of this lesson right now.